Mixing in headphones can really stink, so let's talk about why and some ways we can fix it. Hey, if you're new here, my name's James and I help sound techs make stuff sound better, so whether you're mixing for your band on Saturday or your church on Sunday, you're in the right place. Go ahead and mash subscribe to get updates whenever I post a new video. There are a bunch of challenges when you're mixing in headphones, and if you've ever made a mix in headphones and thought it sounded awesome, and then you go listen to it someplace else, you might have found some of these problems. So the first one is that headphones have their own tone. There's two different types of headphones in general. There's open back headphones and there's closed back headphones. Open back headphones don't isolate the sound either from those around you or the outside sounds that are coming in as well. The advantage is that they can be less colored than closed back headphones. So you get better frequency response, but you don't get as much isolation. Closed back headphones can isolate a little bit more, but they can tend to sound a little bit more boxy. Another thing that's hard about mixing in headphones is that they're actually tuned to sound a certain way. Some are hyped up with a lot of bass. I see you beats. And other ones are really, really bright to make it feel like it sounds better. But it doesn't always sound natural, and whenever we're in a listening environment and creating a mix, our mix will be the reciprocal of what our listening environment is. So if our headphones have a whole lot of low end, our mix is going to be a little bit thin. Or if they've got too much top end, our mix is going to end up dull. And we don't want that. We just want natural sounding headphones that help us make the best mix decisions, not necessarily be hyped up for enjoying when we're listening to rap music. And that's what we want when we're mixing music. We want headphones that translate from system to system, and they're kind of a middle of the road of bright and dark, bassy and thin. We don't want it too much in either direction. Another challenge with headphones is that you hear every detail. So that can make it so that you push up your reverb too far, and then on other systems, things feel washed out and far away. But every detail felt so good in your headphones. The other problem is that all that detail means that we can clearly hear things that might be buried in the mix. So in the headphones, we can hear that little guitar part, but it goes away when we listen on speakers or on our phone. Another difference between headphones and studio monitors is that we're isolated from the acoustic space. And that might actually be your goal, in that your acoustic space sounds bad, and so you're not getting an accurate representation from your studio monitors, so you think headphones are going to fix that. But they just trade those problems for some different problems, like not hearing enough reflections, so you add too much reverb, like we talked about a minute ago. Another issue that comes up with mixing in headphones is the stereo width. Stereo is an attempt to use two speakers to create a binaural sound field. But wait, I just used a nerdy word. What does binaural sound field mean? Well, the combination of our ears, the physiology, and our brains, which is a big timing supercomputer, tells us where a sound is coming from. There are basically 3 or 4 ways, depending on how nerdy you get, we can tell what direction a sound is coming from. Either there's a timing difference between when it arrives at this ear and when it arrives at this ear, or there's a frequency or level difference between when it arrives at this ear versus this ear. When you mix in headphones and you pan something all the way to the right side, you're only hearing it in that ear, and all the frequencies are only on this side. Whereas if you were mixing on a pair of studio monitors, the lower frequencies coming from this side would also be reaching this side, but just a little bit later. Another factor that might change the way that you hear in headphones compared to somebody else is that your actual physiology, or the shape of your outer ear and your ear canal, play a part in how you localize and hear the difference of tones in different sounds. What that means for your mix is that you'll tend to pan stuff a little bit further toward the middle and not make room for the vocals down the center by panning things hard left and right. Because of this issue, it can be really hard to get the vocal pocket just right, or the balance between the band and the vocal. Now, the vocal pocket is not a trivial thing, and even many pro mix engineers will send multiple mixes to the mastering engineer with the vocal kind of where they think is the good spot, and a vocal up and a vocal down mix. These options can help when they're compressing in the mastering process to make sure that that vocal is locked to the band just right. Another problem comes when we start mixing in reverb, so we can actually drown something in all that luscious, smooth reverb that sounds weird when we're listening on speakers. And pro tip, the diffusion control on your reverb is handy for making reverbs feel a little bit more choppy or rough. That sounds weird in headphones, but much better when you're farther away from the speakers. So keep that one in mind next time you're mixing and play with that diffusion knob and see if you can hear the difference. So how are we going to overcome these problems if you're forced to mix in headphones, or headphones are the only option that you have? The first tip that I have for you is to mix in mono. Now, this feels weird because you want to make a stereo mix and you want it to be wide, right? Well, you can get all your balance of placing instruments on the left side and the right side, making sure that there's equal weight there. You can make sure that your toms and your overheads have a nice stereo image, getting there with headphones. But in mono, you really are forced to make sure that the vocal is just barely out in front and not covered up. And then in stereo, you can expect the vocal to pop back in the mix a little bit and be in that vocal pocket. One tip that I picked up for mixing vocals is to make it so that in mono, the vocals are just out in front of the mix. And in stereo, the vocals are just tucked back in the mix. That's how you know you've got the right level of proportion with vocals to band. Another tip is to tell you that gain structure and experience can help you dial in the level of your effects. If you have your vocal or instrument effects on a send, and then that send is coming back and your send is at 0, and your send master is at 0, the return fader can be at -12, and that's a great starting place for a natural balance of reverb to dry signal. Remember, your reverb needs to be on a post-fader aux send, so the reverb levels change as your input level changes. For other short delays or even longer musical delays, you can go up or down from that, but I usually like to start around -18 for a lot of my short and spatial delays. Another tool that really helps me out a lot are the Waves NX plugins. These take the tones and the ambience of high-end recording studios and simulate it coming in through your headphones. They also include headphone EQ, so if you love your Beats by Dre, but the hyped up low end is causing your mixes to get thin, it compensates for that and puts it in a target EQ curve for how your headphones would sound and kind of flattens them out. They're not precisely flat. There's actually a tonal curve that you're aiming for that takes into account the fact that you've got speakers right next to your ear canals and not sounds coming straight from in front of you. Having the early reflections from the room and hearing the low end of one side and the other ear really helps us feel like we're actually in a space and not just isolated in a pair of headphones. The room resonances and reflections that we're hearing also help us not dial in too much reverb, and they help our effects stay in the realistic ballpark. Because as much as you can know what you should do with effects levels, you really just want to feel it right. And that's the goal. With music, we're trying to mix for a feeling. We're trying to communicate that, and if we have to think about it, we're not going to mix as well as if we're just feeling it. So let me show you what these plugins do and how I might mix differently with them and without them. So I've set up this mix the way that I might if I didn't already know that I needed more width from headphones. So the two instruments that we're going to take a look at are the electric guitar and the piano. And the electric guitar is down the middle and the piano stereo, so it's panned hard left and right. Let's just listen to a brief section so you can kind of hear what the song's like. Because the headphones are giving me plenty of space, it might not feel like I really need to pan it hard left and right, but let me rearrange some stuff the way that it probably should sound, just based on experience of, stereo fields. So it's this electric guitar here that I'm gonna pan over to the left, and my piano, instead of it being hard left and right over here, I'm gonna take one side, maybe pan it to the middle, or maybe over a little bit. We'll see how that gets things a little bit wider in the mix. And then some tools that we can use to help figure that out and make it not feel so super wide. So we can hear they're balancing each other pretty well. There's still some separation on the piano. But the thing is, in headphones, it feels really wide. It feels like it's way out here on the sides of my head. So the plugin that I'm going to use over here is on the Listen bus. If you don't have this in Studio One, you can go to this little gear wheel and enable Listen bus. This is just going to make it so that we can put processing that's not on our master bus, but it's just what we're listening to. This is helpful if you're doing, live stream broadcast mixing. And we're going to go over here. I'm just going to type in NX. There's a bunch of different NX versions. My favorite one is the Ocean Way Nashville, partly because I got to work there a little bit when I was in college. Took a few classes in that room, so it was really fun. And here we go. You can see there's the studio. That's what it looks like. Key note here, if you're going to learn a big studio, learn the patch bay. That's really the critical idea to getting hired as an assistant. And outboard gear is beautiful. Piano's beautiful, all that. Fun stuff. Cool. So hit 0 degrees to get back to the center. But we could actually hear what it's like when we turn our head around like that. So we hit 0, get back to the center. We can select our studio monitors. Remember earlier how I said that your physiology actually changes the way that you hear binaurally? Well, waves accounted for that as well. So you can measure the circumference of your head and measure the distance from ear to ear back behind your head, and they'll calculate what the reflections should sound like to give you a more realistic picture of what it would be like for you in that room. But the thing that I want to show you is the head modeling. I took some measurements of my head in centimeters, so I'm going to put this to my settings. 56, and ear to ear for me was 29. I guess the back of my head is really big. I don't know. You can see in their documentation how you measure for that. So that's going to work for me. And then over here is the headphone EQ. Now they just added a bunch more models for their headphones. So there's over 200 something different models of headphones and in-ear monitors. And I have the Audio-Technica M50Xs. So that's what I'm going to choose for my monitor EQ. Now from this point, you might want to listen on headphones and not just on your phone, because that'll make the biggest difference. So clearly if you're mixing in headphones, you probably have some headphones. So if you don't have them with you, go ahead and pause the video and come back when you got them. Because it's going to sound weird in speakers if we're emulating studio monitors and listening through studio monitors. It's not a good combo. So let's take a listen to what it's like now through the NX plugin. So with it on, we're hearing more of what would be considered the crosstalk, or the way that the lower frequencies below about 1K are going to actually wrap around my head and come to the other ear, where they're not going to do that on the other side. So instead of making everything feel like it's way out here to the side, it's moved it forward, so then I can make panning decisions to spread stuff out a little bit better. Let's take a look at a section of the song that's got some background vocals and see what we can do to make those have a little bit wider stereo spread. And this one's a freebie because it's not necessarily about mixing in headphones, but it's about getting your wider mixes in general. So over here, let's go to a section where there's the background vocal. So that's pretty cool, but we can do a trick to widen out that background vocal just a little bit. So here it is in the yellow. I'm going to pan it over to the right, and I'm going to turn on an effect. I've got this Vox short delay over here that I set up. And I'm going to unmute it. It's panned all the way to the left. It's also sent to the Vox reverb, and all my effects I put EQ before them to filter them out a little bit more. But then I've got the Super Tap plugin for a short delay on here. So I've got 84 milliseconds on one side, 36 milliseconds on the other side, but they're all panned both to the left. So take that, with a grain of salt. And there's a little bit of feedback as well. Let's just listen to what that sounds like now that we've got it wider, and through the NX plugin, that's going to help it feel like we can push stuff out farther without it feeling like it's too far. All right, so with the vocal soloed, let's listen to it with this effect, with the stereo thing going on.
You use the words of an old gone man. Say God will strike the shepherd down, down.
Cool. Now let's put it back to the middle and see what that's like.
You use the words of an old gone man.
It's a lot less interesting. We're getting a lot less space because we didn't move that out farther to the sides. Now let's listen to that trick with and without the NX plugin to see how you might avoid doing it if you were just mixing straight through headphones, but it actually sounds good when you're emulating studio monitors.
I've been wrong before, but I swear they won't define me now. Oh, I knew you were wrong, 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 wrong about me. I knew you were wrong, 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 wrong about me. Oh, I knew you were wrong, 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 wrong about me. I knew you were wrong, wrong, wrong about me.
That concludes that demo. A lot of times when I'm mixing in a digital audio workstation, I'm actually mixing a live broadcast. So I have the program feed that needs to go out right away, but I need to put this NX plugin on a different path. For Studio One and Harrison Mix Bus, they actually have a separate bus that you can put plugins on that doesn't affect the main output. So you can insert this plugin without affecting your main mix going out to the broadcast. Waves has 5 different studio emulations you can choose from. So if you want to demo them and see which one helps your mixes translate the best, you can do that. So if you're like me and you work from home, sometimes you have to live in headphones to avoid the noise of everybody else that's at your home. But if you want to use NX plugins for that, I figured out a way to do it with my console and Live Professor. So let's check it out. In Live Professor, I can create a new chain. I'm going to call my chain NX. I'm going to have it be stereo. And I'm going to have my first input be 37 and 38 because that's the tape playback from the computer, my PC back into the console. That's the tape input. I'm going to have my first output be channel 35. That way it's going to switch back and go into a separate channel. So it's coming out the USB direct out from the USB input that's coming out of the computer, back into the computer for Live Professor, and then back out again to a second channel. So now on aux input 2, I'm going to have the ability to put plugins on what I'm listening to from my computer audio. So this could be YouTube videos, this could be Spotify, but I mostly use Spotify. So I'm going to hit OK here and go here and let's do Abbey Road stereo. Load this up and we check it out over here. Bring this back up. I'm going to set my user default personalization so that I know that it's mine. I'm going to turn on the headphone EQ for when I'm doing it. And now I can even select my different monitors that I'm using while I'm listening to music and Spotify. So let's say I want to hear some Corey Wong and I want to hear it in headphones but not bother other people or not hear other people in the room. I can still make it feel like I'm listening to an awesome studio. So there's a little free trick for you. So I had to make sure that my USB ins and outs were set up properly on the console, and now I can turn on and off different studios if I want while I'm listening to music. It's pretty fun. So there you go. If you're mixing in headphones, I hope these tips were helpful for you. If you liked this video, mash thumbs up, hit subscribe, and don't ding the little bell. You have enough notifications in your life already. This video was not sponsored, but I am a Waves affiliate. So if you're gonna buy some plugins and you wanna support the channel, you can do so by clicking through the link in the description. Remember, it's all about the low end, avoid the sound tech solo, and nobody leaves humming the kick drum. Binge watch some other videos over here, and we'll see you back here next time on Attaway Audio.